One, blast off.
Okay.
All right. Welcome to the Right Tack, where we help private practice owners face the headwinds of the healthcare industry. I'm Paul Jonas, CEO and co-founder of Breezy Billing and Phoenix Credentialing.
And I'm Jim Jonas, therapist, co-founder of Breezy Billing, Phoenix Credentialing, and the Jonas Center.
Today, we are joined by Sara Ranssi, the owner and a mental health therapist at Hope and Healing Family Counseling in Roseville, Minnesota. Sara has built her practice around serving children, adolescents, and families, and she's also a registered play therapist with nearly 20 years of experience working with the deaf community.
Sara's here to talk with us about something every practice owner wrestles with at some point. How do you define your niche, find your ideal client, and build a practice that feels both meaningful and sustainable?
We'll explore how focusing on a niche can protect therapists from burnout, enhance client care, and actually help your practice grow stronger over time.
Okay, Sara, welcome to the Right Tack.
Well, hello. It's really nice to be with both of you today. If it's helpful, I can share just a little bit about kind of my journey to be a practice owner and kind of the work I've done in this field.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of interesting. I always kind of say I stumbled into this. I was leaving my undergrad and not quite sure what I was going to do. And someone suggested rehab counseling to me. And so there was a program down in Northern Illinois that was trying to get more signing professionals in the field to work with deaf and hard of hearing clients. And so, at the thought of a master's degree that would be funded for me, like that sounded very appealing. So I started that work and really fell in love with the deaf community, but pretty quickly realized I needed to understand mental health a lot more. So I had the chance to go back to school at the University of Minnesota, and I was able to work there and work on my social work degree. And then kind of, again, stumbled into the field of children's mental health. I got to work for a program that was doing community mental health with deaf and hard of hearing children. And then kind of decided it was time to leave mental health at one point and started the venture of private practice.
Fantastic. Yeah. Should we dive in?
Quite a learning experience.
So how long have you been working with, children and families in this area?
Yeah. So I would say I started in adult mental health and again, really enjoyed it, but I don't know, kind of wanted to get into the world of children. So I've probably been working with children since about 2002. So it's been, well over 20 years now. I do work a little bit through the age range, but children and teens have kind of been the specialty of our practice for a long time now.
Okay. Oh, great. Thanks.
All right. So we're here today to talk about defining your niche, finding your ideal client, and building a practice that's meaningful and sustainable that we brought up before. But before we get too far into this, we do like to ask everyone kind of the same question on this show. And it is, what are you doing this weekend?
Okay. So what I am doing this weekend is, it's usually the answer to that question is always going to be youth sports of some capacity. So this weekend I get to take my 11-year-old swimmer and we are headed to Brown Deer, Wisconsin, which is down by Milwaukee. And we've got a swim meet for a couple of days. So I'm going to be spending my weekend at the swimming pool.
Oh, fantastic. I've got some family near Brown Deer on my wife's side. Good part of the world.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. My husband's coming to Wisconsin, but he's coming to go to the Packer Vikings game. So
Okay.
Border battle continues.
Right.
Sure.
Hopefully they're not as good as the Bears were or as bad as they were this past week.
Did the Vikings lose by any chance? Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I know a couple staff from Illinois and they're Bears fans, and we let them rub it in a little bit.
Great.
On the group chat.
Yeah.
How about you? What do you got going on this weekend?
Well, like usual in the fall, I think I'm going to be splitting wood.
Oh, there you go.
we just got this new splitter from last year. You've probably heard about it on one of the previous
Another thing we talk a lot about, the log splitter, the
Podcasts, yeah,
side by
yeah.
side, and your solar
Yeah,
panels.
yeah. So yeah, I split some yesterday and it was so much fun. And if it's nice out at all, it's great being outside after sitting in the office all afternoon or all day, during the
For
week.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited with the old splitter. Finding out if
Oh,
we can get that to work. The piston broke on the old split.
oh my
So
gosh.
we'll
Had to
see.
drive to Hutchinson to see if we could get it fixed. And the guy said, he looked at it and goes, "Oh, I don't know. I'll work on it for a half hour. And if I can't get it fixed, I'm going to suggest you get a new one." So I haven't heard back yet.
We'll see how that goes.
What about you?
I'm also doing some wooding
Ah.
this weekend as well. I've got a friend has a huge tree hanging over his house, and he's renting a lift, kind of like what we did about a year ago.
Yeah.
At our house. And so he's going to be taking that down. So I'll be helping him out. But this time I don't have to go up in the lift and look, 30 feet down at the top of my house.
Okay. Great. I'm glad to hear that.
A lot of fun to be had.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right. I think we got some good weekends planned. I think all of us.
Yeah.
Sounds like a real good one. But let's talk about finding your niche. And it's niche. Is it interchangeable?
Oh, let's get it from the expert.
I'm
here.
the expert. Oh,
I mean, really good question. And I had a little bit of a moment of panic before I came on where I was actually like, how do you pronounce this word?
Uh-huh.
And so, of course, I turned to the internet.
yeah.
And the one that I listened to said niche. So tomato, right?
Oh, wow.
Our producer listened, or no. And was it she or was it you that said
You said niche, and ours said neat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm
it
gonna
sounds
go
like we can go both ways.
Fully interchangeable.
Okay.
Okay.
We could pronounce
Right.
it.
User
find a
preference.
third.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Whatever rhymes. Here, I see that.
Right. Okay. Whatever rhymes. Listen to this. So Sarah, we're going to get started here.
The power of finding your niche. Except.
Okay. That's the title of the program. However, you said that riches are in the niches. And not just financially. You see it as a tool for sustainability. Can you talk about what that means and how you've seen that play out in your own case?
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's really fun to talk about, the riches is in the niches. And I think that can be from a financial perspective. But I think a lot of times, the more we can specialize in this work, the more meaningful it can make it, the more energizing it can be for us. And, I think sometimes when I hear the word niche, I think of it as like one thing. And I want to really say that I'm not promoting we do just one thing, because I think in this field, in private practice, the more we can diversify things, the more I think it keeps us really healthy in this work. But I think of it as, what are some different areas of specialization where I can really grow my skills, feel very confident, because I think that's going to translate into kind of therapist well-being is, feeling confident in what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's going to translate into really good, high quality care for children and families, right? And I think it's just going to continue to promote a wealth in all that we're doing.
Well, when did you first realize the importance of it?
Yeah. So, I think what I would say around that is, so when I was first starting in community mental health, I was supported by this grant. And so I was going into a lot of schools and homes. I was driving all over the Twin Cities. So I just had this steep learning curve just in the logistics of my job, but also because I was at all these different schools, I was sort of assigned a student that happened to be at that school that needed mental health support. So I was finding that I just had this huge need to be this generalist in so many different things. And so early in my career, I was, living by myself. I didn't have a family at that time. So I was seeing a high number of kiddos every day. And then I was going home and I was reading on my nights and weekends. And I was just trying to figure out, how do I attend to all these different presenting concerns that are coming my way?
Mm-hmm.
And it was really valuable in my learning, but I felt so stretched. I felt like I wasn't good enough really at anything. And I was really, I was kind of failing. I wasn't helping my clients. I was depleted. It was just kind of this perfect storm. And then, um, there's and I was trying to do a lot of, like, talk therapy with young children who didn't have the skills, but that was my only training. So, I had the opportunity. So there's a woman named Alexis Greaves who's been my longtime business partner and just, one of the top therapists I know. And she moved here from DC and had this really unique expertise in providing play therapy to children with a hearing loss. And so it was like the universe was saying, like, we're going to help you with this niche because they just kind of presented Alexis to our agency and it was this huge gift. And so she really helped me to understand the value of play and working with children. And then I saw this huge transformation in the kiddos I was working with. Like, we were enjoying our time together. There was a lot less frustration. They were kind of processing through more. I was starting to get reports from their parents, their caregivers, their teachers that their behavior was changing. And so I really started to think about, like, oh, if I'm going to work with this really special underserved population, I'm going to need to hone in on a skill set that's really going to honor what this population needs. And so that was the first time I really kind of started to think about what does it mean to be a generalist in the field of mental health versus kind of bringing a specific skill set to the work that I'm doing.
What a cool, what great feedback to see, these children responding to something that you're trying and learning and working with them on. That must be
Yeah.
just,
Yeah.
just great.
Yeah. It felt like a really huge gift. And then it was interesting when Alexis and I started our practice. Again, we worked in a small community, so a lot of us knew each other. But it wasn't until much later that I realized, like, oh, other private practice owners are having to do a lot of marketing. They're having to do a lot. But because I think our niche was so small, I think maybe I took for granted that, like, yeah, we've got a website, but I don't know. And so then I really saw, like, oh, yeah, when you have a well defined niche and people know where to find you, it really can, limit how much marketing you have to do in a lot of ways. So that was a little bit eye opening for me as well.
Hmm.
Cool.
Okay. Well, so Sarah, I hear how you kind of switched gears a bit with seeing kids and how you were seeing kids. I'm wondering, okay, the connection between that and with the deaf community, and how did that happen for you?
Yeah. So it's kind of the same story. A lot of the children I was working with were at schools for the deaf. So I was like down at Minnesota State Academy for the deaf and some of the different schools that had deaf students at it. So, and that's where I was finding I was working with children that had some delays in their language. They were navigating multiple languages. And so there wasn't this like fluency for talk therapy. And so that's where it really kind of continued to call upon me to find a way that was able to be much more successful. And so I think kind of those play based, expressive art based modalities really kind of took the language barriers out of the therapy and created a more common language for us to kind of share and process the content in the sessions.
Yeah.
Huh, so it kind of, by focusing in, you kind of, I don't know, it broadened your reach a little bit at the same time.
Mhm, mhm. Yep, yep. And then it's been really interesting too because then I've had, referrals for maybe adults with cognitive disabilities, which is a completely different population, but some of the crossover of expressive modalities, kind of minimizing the need for language in sessions, kinda it shifted into different ways, and you could apply those skills to different areas and support different clientele. And so it was interesting to see just how that could both narrow and expand who I was working with at the same time.
Cool. So,
Yeah.
so what would you say to therapists who are afraid that picking a niche is going to limit them, or that they're afraid of turning people away?
Yeah. 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 That's a really good question. And I think that's one that I hear a lot.
Mm.
Um, I think there's a couple of things around that. I think there's this fear of turning people away because there's this belief that like there's not going to be enough clients or I'm not going to be able to pay the bills because I don't have enough clients. And so
Mm.
we kind of start operating under this modality of like desperation and scarcity and there's not going to be enough. But I think what we're really talking about is kind of honing in on who we work with in a very caring way. And so to me, it really isn't about like turning someone away, but it's like finding this match. Because one of my like hardest things to take in the field of mental health is I think sometimes we operate under this assumption that any person can call any clinic and you get assigned a therapist and that's the person you're going to work with and it's going to be super successful. And I think we don't do enough in our field to think about how do we notice what the client's needing and match them with a therapist that has that skill set. So for me, I know that if I can't provide what an individual need because I don't have that skill in my therapy work, it feels more honoring of their experience to be able to say like, I don't think I'm the therapist for you. Let me help you get to someone who can serve you. So I don't really think of it as like turning people away, but I think, can I help you to get to someone who's really going to serve you? And then that allows me to notice, okay, with the next referral coming in, is that someone that there's going to be a different match in our skill set? And then we're really going to be able to do this work that promotes the more long term healing.
Hmm.
So how when so it's kind of like thinking about referral or taking what this person who this person is and what they're looking for or in need of, and trying to match them with somebody else who can reach out. How do you can you talk a little bit about your process for that?
Hmm.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah. So, we're in the process, Paul, and I have had a lot of conversations about growing practices. And so, our practice for a long time stayed very small. And just recently, we've started to expand into more employees. And, we're up to about 12 therapists practicing out of our office at this time. And so it's interesting when you think about this from a referral perspective, because I do think sometimes, I always get curious, right? If we bring in a little bit of AI here, right? You see all this stuff about AI, virtual assistants, and things like that. And so as a practice owner, is it about getting people onto calendars to fill slots, which is one approach, and it's not a bad approach by any means. But we've taken an approach of having more of a referral coordinator. And so that we have someone that can add a little bit more of a personal touch on the front end to doing a little assessment of like, what are children and families needing as they contact our practice, and who in our practice might have the skills to serve that individual or family. And I think sometimes even beyond that, we'll even do a consultation with people to say, what is it truly that you are looking for? How do you hope that therapy is going to make a change for your family? And then as we can start to pair them with a therapist that can really support that, then we're, really not seeing drop off, right? We're seeing the success where right from the start, there's some investment from the therapist and the family to do this work together because we have that agreement very early on in the process.
Okay.
Oh yeah, I like matchmaking.
Well,
Yeah.
Yep.
and kind of the flip side of that is something I heard that you ask your team, which is who is your ideal client? And you're talking about a balance there, but if you could speak to that a little bit, Sarah, that'd be helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is another thing that I really credit Alexis with bringing into our practice is just this opportunity to ask, like, who is your ideal client and your ideal clientele? And really what we're finding when we're asking that question is in this field where there's so much complexity and so much depletion and burnout, like what energizes you in this work? And so whether it's like thinking about, what client sessions do you feel most energized from, but also kind of like what's your unique skills and training and
Mm.
talents that you bring to this work and how can we use those to help you find sustainability in this field? Because I think when we're not noticing where are we good in this field and we're trying to kind of be this generalist and this expert in so many areas, I think as clinicians we feel really pulled. We start to kind of get into a lot of that imposter syndrome of like, I'm trying to do this really important work, but I don't feel equipped to do it. And that's kind of a really perfect recipe, I think, for burnout in this field. But if we can take a step back and notice, like, what energizes you? And it doesn't have to be one thing, right? Again, when we're looking for diversity in this work, what are a couple areas of specialty that energize you in this work? Because it always amazes me, right? there may be a clinical issue that I find so hard and perplexing to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And you're going to find a therapist who loves that. They're like, oh, that's what I do. Like, that's my favorite. So just to like honor that just because it feels hard for me, there are people in this field that love to do that work, which I think makes this kind of exciting. And so, how can we support each other in finding the clients and the work that's going to be
Yeah.
meaningful to us?
Right.
Oh, that makes so much sense, and I think
Well,
that's any
yeah.
well-run organization, I'll say, you have to be able to find strengths and, and also know where there's need so you can then go find those strengths.
Right.
Totally.
Yeah. Well, and
Mhm.
energizing therapists too, to prevent burnout and really keep them, what I want to say, passionate about what they're doing. I mean, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense, Sarah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I think maybe to look at it too as something that can change over time, right?
Hmm.
Like, um, just to give an example, like when I started having my own children, you know, I I love being in the playroom, but all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, it feels really hard to be in the playroom all day and then try to go play with my kiddos at home." And so, like, it was interesting to reflect on, like, this area of the work that used to energize me feels a little bit hard right now, and it's probably just a reflection of where I'm at in my life. But it was interesting information then to say, "Okay, can I not eliminate children from my caseload, but can I recalibrate that a little bit so I can kinda notice that I'm having a lot of enjoyment in sitting with adults as they do trauma work, and that feels really meaningful to me right now. So at different points in our career too, to also feel like we can take some freedom to recalibrate what energizes us.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so when you're talking about niche, you're not talking about just serving exclusive populations, is what I hear you saying. And I love, I was just at a conference and the discussion of provider burnout was, different. I overheard different people talking about that. And so it's definitely,
Mhm.
um, it's definitely salient. But I love how you're bringing in just the idea of energy, sustainability, and integrity into what you're
Mhm.
doing at Hope and Healing.
Mhm.
So, can you give us an example of how you'd help a clinician find their clarity or find their niche or what they're best at, and then,
Yeah.
find the direction in the work?
Yeah. So I can actually, and I have a supervisee that I asked for permission to share this a little, share kind of some of his journey with, because I thought that he and we together did really good work in kind of defining his niche. So a few years ago, I was kind of, um, I want to say approached, but I think it was like a Facebook pairing or something like that, where we found each other online, and this individual was looking for clinical supervision. And so I said, I provide that if you'd be interested in hearing about what I do. Let's again kind of assess if we're a good match. And he was really looking for some support in developing his clinical skills around trauma treatment. And as we started talking, he said, it's really my passion to provide therapy in the transgender and queer community. We said, okay. And so we started to go forward with this work. And we're, this clinician was developing skills in trauma treatment and doing a lot of different stuff. He was very motivated, very active. And yet we were noticing that he was coming to our supervision from week to week with kind of more and more depletion.
Hmm.
And so we started to be curious about, like, tell me about the depletion, like what's underneath and driving that for you. And he was able to identify that he was sitting with a lot of people and their trauma was manifesting kind of as this very like shut down nervous system state. There was lots of depression, and that was just really hard for him to be sitting in that. So we noticed, right? Like, we're not going to say, let's not serve clients with trauma, but we did a lot of skill building in that area. How do you work with kind of depression and depletion in your client population? But then we also started to notice, like, what sessions are you coming away from that have a different feel?
Yeah.
And so he started to notice, I really like working with neurodiversity. I really like helping people to notice, how does their brain work? What are some things that are unique to you that make you really successful? And he was really enjoying much more of this like skill building model. And so we said, okay, so let's just notice the difference between those two things. And as he was able to notice that difference, he's like, yeah, this is really where I want to hone in my clinical skills. So then it was really fun because then we were able to say, like, okay, let's look at your next year of continuing education. Like, what do you want to do that's going to help support this skill building and work in neurodiversity? He was also able to notice and communicate with their kind of receptionist and referral coordinator to say, like, this is who I want to be marketing myself to. I will work with kind of people with a number of presenting issues, but I need enough kind of clients on my caseload that really want to do this skill building around neurodiversity. And we just started to notice that he was coming to our supervision sessions a lot more energized. He was getting really positive feedback from some of his clients, which then again just kind of fueled his motivation to continue to deepen this niche. And, he had some other niches that he was working, but, you could really see the difference just in his whole body language from week to week as he was feeling the energy and the compliments and the kind of shared collaborations with his clients around this skill building area.
Hmm. Oh, that's cool. That's a great story, great ending. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking
Yeah.
it's kind of fits in with my next question about, the fear of saying no to someone, like a client or, especially when you're just starting out. And what I'm hearing, you mentioned this a little bit before, Sarah, but what I'm also hearing you say is, it is so valuable to find your niche and it can change over time and
Mhm.
just seeing the energy, it's almost like self-care, the therapist is what I'm hearing, it doesn't, it
It
prevents
totally is.
burnout. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's totally self-care of the therapist, and I think protection for clients too, to make sure that we can honor what they need. But yeah, total self-care for therapists.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's I wasn't sure how we were going to do this with the niche or niche or what, but you're convincing me more and more how important it is, for people to really identify, what gets them going, and then to
Mhm.
work at having them see some clients that way. That's great.
Yeah.
How hard is that, Sarah, to work with to work with somebody to help them identify that? Like what kind of questions do you find yourself asking, or does the team ask, or what's that look like at Hope and Healing or for
Yeah.
you?
Yeah. I mean, I think our team at Hope and Healing, one of the beautiful things is, we're a really reflective group. And so we're constantly just reflecting on like, how's that feeling? How's that going? We've got some new clinicians coming in, and I think sometimes we gravitate towards a niche. I think sometimes the like therapy universe sends us like three clients with the same presenting issue sometimes. And you're like, oh, maybe the universe is calling me to like build a skill set here. But we had one therapist who's taken on a number of family therapy clients that have like teenage or that have adult children in like that 17 to 25-year-old range. And so it's really been interesting to say, like, okay, you've done a couple of sessions now. How does that feel? And you could see there was like a lot of enjoyment for her around that. And so we just kind of sat with like, what do you think? Do you want more of that? Does this feel fun? Like, what do we follow here? And so I think sometimes just checking in of like, oh yeah, I've done a few sessions with families with older children, and now I'm going to reflect on that. And so that's kind of what we utilize. And then also kind of that permission for clinicians to say, actually, this isn't energizing me, or I don't
Mm.
feel like I have the skill set yet to support this clinical presenting issue. And then we can also honor that and say, okay, do you need some support with skill building? Do we want to kind of explore some other clinical areas? So I think just a lot of reflection and permission giving, right, for clinicians to say, like, this is where I want to go with my work.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
cool.
Oh, wow. So,
Yeah. I
oh,
yeah.
go ahead.
Well, I was just the other thing I was gonna say in part of this, like, niche creating is I think sometimes we don't talk enough about, pulling our clients into the decision. So, I've
Yeah.
talked about a lot of times I will do a consultation with people because I think in honoring, like, tell me what you really want from therapy. And
Mm,
let me tell you how I work and let's see if that's a match. Very often I think it is, but I have also had clients say, like, "Oh, I don't think I wanna do somatic trauma work, and that's your niche." And then we've been able to say, "Okay, so let's just notice that. Oh, like, you were thinking you wanted maybe EMDR." And so I think it can be more honoring of our clients too to say, "I don't wanna, like, have you have to fit my skill set. Let's really get you to an EMDR therapist if that's what you want." So I think sometimes we forget that we can honor and pull clients into helping make this decision of, like, does my niche serve you well, or do we need to explore something else?
mhm. Okay, so as a practice owner, I'm hearing you value, you know, finding a therapist niche, and refining that and really, what do I want to say, expanding on that. Uh, I'm
Mhm.
also wondering, as an agency, though, how that fits in with your values and your mission. And yeah, if you could unpack that a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think one of the things and Jim, I think you really mentioned it before when you were talking about like therapist self-care. And so I think we're doing a lot of like parallel process here of as we're trying to support niches that keep our clinicians healthy and energized in the field, right? That's going to create a lot of good client care. And I think
Hmm.
that's going to help with client engagement when your clinician shows up each week grounded and energized in the work. And so I think that that's what we're kind of trying to promote is this parallel process of keeping our clinicians healthy so they can do this really honoring work with the people that our agency is serving. So I don't know if that answers your question or if there was another piece of that that you wanted me to speak to.
Well, one of the things, well, one of my rules to live by, as an owner too, as a practice owner, is how do you stay? How do you create a very what do I want to say, nurturing environment for the therapist, and one where you can, for me, how I label it is, I want to stay out of your way when you're doing therapy. Um,
Yeah.
but when you need support, I want, give me a call and I'll be there for you. But, I don't want all of the too many administrative rules, this and that and the other thing and all this kind of stuff. And so that's what I do at the Jonas Center quite a bit. And, you know, how that, the language that you're using, I'm finding really interesting today, and, how you use that within your agency.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess I would say when with that question, which I love, one of the things that I'm thinking about is as a social worker, one of the things in my code of ethics is that I practice within my scope of practice. And so I think as we're defining our niche and building our clinical skills in that area, it allows me to really like honor that ethical principle that I need to carry out in my work. Um, and so I think too, right? Like it also allows me as a practice owner then to feel really confident that that clinician is being responsible in their client care, which I think allows me not to overmanage, right? Then I think I can feel really confident that the clinicians that are at our practice are well trained and doing work that they love. And hopefully, like you said, will come to me when they're stuck or they need support. And there's some freedom to say, like, this is my niche. Ooh, this is kind of pulling me a little bit out of my niche. I need some support in this
Mhm.
area. And that can be okay as well.
Yeah.
And so that, yeah, through defining it, it's easier to figure out where those borders are and when you need help
Mhm.
if you're crossing those. I hear you.
Yep.
So, um, so you've talked about how having a niche helps clients find the right therapist faster, and we talked a little bit about that trial and error of like if we're a good fit, the client provider experience. So Sarah, you've been talking about improving that therapeutic alliance, between therapist and client, and how when people are energized with, some their niche and what they're interested in, what that brings to the therapeutic relationship. Do you, is there more like, do you have outcomes that you see happening more, and any other ways that we haven't talked about where you see it improving that relationship between therapist and client?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I don't know that I have outcomes in the sense of anything really tangible per se, but one of the things that I'm thinking about that I think we know contributes to reductions in burnouts in this field is sort of allowing therapists to show up authentically in this work.
Mm,
And I think, when we think of the flip side of like, if I have a niche and I can be competent and I can show up in a way that's going to serve me well and I can be kind of authentic in that. I think on the flip side, when we have to be a generalist or we're called to serve clinical issues that we don't feel a lot of competence in, very quickly, I think we're operating from a stance of like, oh, I'm called to be an expert. Can I be vulnerable and say, I don't know? Can I be authentic in disclosing to the client that I haven't done this very much? And so, yeah, I think we mentioned just kind of how that breeds sort of this imposter syndrome, which is talked
mm,
about so much in our field, but kind of this idea of like, I'm going through my world hoping nobody like calls me out for not knowing what I'm doing. And I think, a lot of us have enough training to support people in a lot of different ways. And yet, I think when we think about what it serves in being able to show up authentically versus kind of having to hold this like imposter syndrome in our work because we're stretched too thin or we're asked to respond to presenting issues that we don't feel competent in. I don't know if that speaks to outcomes, but I think when you look at the other side of the coin, having to carry that in our nervous system in this work really does contribute to a lot of depletion for therapists.
yeah, yeah, for sure.
So, like, taking it back to your play therapy, how
Mhm.
you had to start, you had to start somewhere. Can you talk a little bit about building up that skill set as an example, maybe of this?
Yeah. 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 Um, yeah. So play therapy was like a huge gift to me. And I think um play therapy can mean a lot of different things, but to become a registered play therapy, it's kind of like getting your license. It's a multi-year process where you're doing a lot of continuing education, you're doing a lot of supervision, and you're really kind of deepening your skills. And so it's been really helpful to see that both in play therapy. And then a number of years later, I committed to like a 3-year training process in somatic experiencing and really got to see that. And so I think it kind of, to me, brings in some interesting conversations in this field around, sometimes as we're like getting up and running as therapists, I think there can be this tendency to, oh, I went to a 2-hour training on this and I went to a 2-hour training on that, which again, beautiful, helpful, gives us lots of really good exposure. And so sometimes I've left a 2-hour play therapy training going, yeah, that was really cool. I wonder if I'll ever use that. But when I committed to this, like, deeper training of how do I learn it? How do I practice it? How do I apply this model?
Mhm.
Like, that felt a lot more like a niche that bred much more confidence for me. So again, right, like, not to take it lightly, it takes a lot of time and money to commit to some of these bigger trainings, and I know, like, that's not something everyone has access to, so I like to acknowledge that, and yet, over time, what that deepens when you can kinda concentrate some of your learning into one area, I think it does often kind of give this skill set that feels a lot more, I think, usable because it really organizes us as clinicians. It gives us something to, when something shows up out of the ordinary in our clinical work, we've got some knowledge to kind of think through that clinically. And again, I just think it keeps us organized and grounding. And so that was one of the things that all this training and play therapy offered for me.
So then how does that fit into your niche now as, I don't know how many years it's been, but how does it fit into your niche? And then what does that mean for the families that you work with?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, So I think it's allowed, as I've explored a couple different niche areas, I've mentioned kind of play therapy, I've mentioned somatic work. I think it's allowed me to be a very playful, movement-based kind of therapist that really honors kind of what we're carrying in our nervous systems. And so I think it's been fun then to um, kind of naturally see therapists come into our practice that value very similar things, although they may do it a little bit differently. right? So we've got some play therapists that love to work with little kids. We've got some play therapists that use sand tray and work with older teens. We've got some play therapists that are really experts in attachment and helping kind of the parent or the caregiver and child dyad. And so it's been fun to see all the different ways that we can support people using in play therapy in a way that's complementary to each other, but kind of honors what we do. And so I think it's been fun. We have a team meeting every month, and our team meetings, we often do something really playful in it.
Hmm.
And kind of just this idea that like play doesn't have to be limited to kids. And so as we can play together as a team, it keeps our nervous systems grounded. It keeps us in social connection with each other. We often have a lot of like laughter in our meetings. And so again, I think we get to like live out that niche of valuing play in all that we do. And then I think it's fun to see families play. And, we brought a lot of intention to our waiting room. And so we've got like little corners where families will sit on like a big beanbag and read together. Sometimes we'll see children and families playing in our waiting room. And so right from the start, we're kind of using play to ground people and unlock their nervous systems even before they move into the therapy room. So we're kind of trying to use it through like all aspects of the process at our practice.
Yeah. Oh yeah, then it's in the blood there. What
Yeah.
do you have an
Yeah.
example of something you do as a staff? I mean, from waiting room to staff to the actual work itself, it's play, right? So I just think that's
Mhm.
so cool. But what is something you do as staff? If we were a fly on the wall or something, what would we see you guys doing in one of those meetings?
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, cool.
So, one thing that was really fun is a couple weeks ago we were introducing like 3 new clinicians. And I'm thinking about like, okay, how do we start building together as a team and coming together? Um And so I was like, okay, we could all just professionally, say our license and what we do and all that stuff. But we ended up playing two truths and a lie. And so everyone had to go around and say two truths and a lie about themselves. And we had to guess. And we found out that there's members of our team that have worked in the circus, and we have people that like were talking about climbing trees and the musical instruments they played. And, people were like, and then, you'd see them the next day and you're like, I can't believe that your truth was that your spirit animal is a giraffe. Like, that is really so
Okay.
interesting to
That
me.
is so cool.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah. So it was really kind of a fun way to like, get over the hump of new people and kind of loosen our nervous systems as we come together in a shared space.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
might have to bring that back to the team.
That's pretty
I
good.
love
Yeah.
that. That's good.
Oh, shoot. Gosh.
Good one.
Oh.
Mhm.
Well, so Sarah, I'm also thinking as a fellow whatever practice owner, and there's there's that administrative niche.
Mhm. Mhm.
and
Yes.
and is that for me to be honest, it's like I like some of that stuff, and so it is energizing for me. I could not see I couldn't do full-time therapy. I it would that would burn me out. But doing, more whatever, half and half or whatever, I do get I get energized by some of that. And just wondering about you and that role that you play.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 For sure. And I think what you're speaking to is something that's been a really important discovery for me as I've gone through this is, I had no administrative business training when I got into this field. And so it's been another area of a steep learning curve, but it's been fun to sort of embrace the business side of things,
Hmm.
to kind of learn, right? I feel like every time I talk to Paul, I learn something about this field. And so, I think it's really been fun to sort of embrace that. But it's also too, one thing that a lot of our therapists at our practice do is we also do clinical supervision. And
Mhm.
there's a couple of us that teach at local universities. And so again, to think about like, can we have some niches even outside of the therapy world to just kind of keep creating that diversity in our work so that, we stay interested and rejuvenated. And I think all that helps us to kind of know like what's current in the field, what's the new information coming in. And that's something that I love as well.
Okay. Well, and so I think this is related too about, if you were to, or for practice owners who are listening today, it's like, what's a first step? Where should they start from your perspective?
Mhm. Yep. I think that's where, kind of coming back to grounding yourself in your values because,
Mm.
you know, we are very clear that our practice is there to make money, right? Like I want to like honor like yes, we are a for-profit organization and yet like getting clients on calendars is not our highest priority. And so that's when we really look at our value of the right fit, knowing that, because we have some niches and because we have like diversity in the work that we do, there's multiple funding streams coming in, there's multiple kind of client referral sources. Um, so, and I'm losing your question now, Jim. Can I
Just
follow up?
Edit.
cut,
Cut.
Great.
All right. Well, we're in good company, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
Right.
I think Sarah may be the first guest that we've had who's actually.
Oh, don't tell her that.
Oh, geez. Oh, I'm sorry about. It was great. You did a great job. Got.
I was like, oh, should I fake my way through this? Or
We're attempting to answer the first question of segment 4.
right. Oh, shoot.
And it's guidance on for owners who want to build their own niche, who want to find their niche,
yeah.
where to start.
Yeah. So, yeah, I think that question of like, obviously financial stability is a piece of this, but then, can we create some meaning around what do we value in client care and what do we value in therapist well-being? And I think those are the things when we can flesh those out a little bit more too, we're really grounded in what do we want to do. So I think part of that then is kind of having some of those things live there together because I think, again, when we're trying to be a practice that's a real generalist or taking on a lot of clients that may stretch our skill sets, again, like no judgment of that. I think there's some people that really like to operate in a more generalist perspective. And so if that's you, I think that's wonderful. But I think it's help us to know like who do we welcome in? Because the other thing too is like we have a lot of kids at our practice it can be kinda loud at our practice. So when I meet with an adult, I'm talking about, we have kids at our practice, they may run up and down the hallway
Mhm.
because that gonna feel comfortable for you. So again, instead of assuming that this is gonna work for every client, we're starting to do that like informed consent from the front end, which I think then if people don't want that, they can look for other therapy practices. Cause I think one of the worst things is you do all this work as administrator to take in the referral, to schedule the assessment, to check insurance. And then you find out in that first meeting, oh, this is a individual that is really sensitive to noise and doesn't want to be listening to kids run up and down the hall. Like that disturbs their therapy work and doesn't allow them to do that. And so then they need to find someone new. We have a new client slot to fill. And so, from a practice perspective, I'd rather kind of take care of some of that stuff on the front end so that when clients start, we have a better chance of them continuing to commit through the process and kind of stabilize clinician caseloads as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So how about the opposite of that? Like what have you seen in maybe some providers or other people, colleagues that you've worked with, where they're trying to find their niche, but they're not? Or what are some things people are trying to do that might not uh, get them to the ends that they're seeking?
Yeah. Yep. I think it's interesting in the sense that like, one thing I think as helpers, um, it can be really hard to say, I'm not going to take on this client right now. But again, I think what we're looking at is the intention that we're bringing to that. Like we're saying no to this client so that we can get them to a better place where they can do the work that they need to do.
Mhm.
But I do think like as a helper and knowing our helper culture, there's often this desire to say yes to anybody who presents for our services. And again, like, I think that pressure is real. It's really hard to say to someone, I don't think I'm the best clinician for you, right? Because we know, and I think we hear all the time stories about people who are not able to find a therapist, long waiting lists. And so I really want to honor from the client perspective, like there can be a lot of desire to get an appointment. And when someone turns us down, like that can feel really hard. So how do we hold that balance of we may be saying, no, I can't serve you right now, but that doesn't mean we're not going to help you to find referrals or get to another place that feels helpful. So I think kind of thinking about how am I talking to people when I decide that they're not the right fit. But also that's where I think these consultations can be helpful because then I think it allows clients to self-assess a little bit of that on their own to say, "Oh yeah, I don't want to do somatic work. I want to do EMDR." And then they've made that decision, which I think can take a little bit of some pressure off of us as well. So I think just kind of messages we have around being helpers and what that means and where we discern who we help and who we may not have the skill set to support in that moment.
You know, as we talk, I just kind of see you like taking a lot of the things people might think about themselves or their work and just turning it a little or sometimes 180. That's just an interesting approach to hiring and working in this field. Seems to me.
Yeah. It's been interesting, and it's been interesting to, like, have people go away and try some of that stuff and report back from week to week or session to session to say, like, "How did that feel to say no?" Or, "How did that feel to say, I have a colleague that really does that work in a different way than I can do?" And oftentimes people come back and say, "Oh, yeah, it felt really good because I really wanted to help that person, but it would've, really challenged me or stretched my skill set." And we just want to honor that there's a time and place for that. And if we're doing that multiple times a week over multiple weeks and months, right, that's a recipe for depletion in therapists.
Mhm. I've heard a theme here with you, Sarah, and, about, okay, yes, we are a for-profit agency, so,
Mhm.
but we're also not going to be doing, just filling a calendar. It's
Mhm.
considering the needs of both the therapist and the client, and I just really love that approach, I guess, and feel like, you've done that to build that workplace culture. You bring play into your meetings, which is great. I love that too. I mean, I guess, I want to ask, are there other things that you do to, what, to be, have a fulfilling, culture, professional culture at your place?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think I'm a little bit new to this, so I can speak from my intention. Maybe the outcomes will be different. But um, I really think this piece of like recognizing that um, like financial success and therapist well-being don't have to be mutually exclusive.
Hmm.
Like that's something I feel really strongly about. And so I think what we're trying to use is a lot of different decision making points. And I think, I've got kind of my own history of working at agencies where everything is driven by productivity.
Hmm.
And and I get that, right? Like, that's a reality of our field. It's expensive. We could talk about insurance reimbursement all day. So, I really wanna honor, like, that is important, and yet if that's our only decision-making point is productivity, like, that's gonna be a recipe for burnout for clinicians. And so, I think what we've really been intentional about is yeah, we wanna get people's caseloads so that they're sustainable for them, so that we've got diversity in a lot of what people are doing, and then continue to reflect on, is that working for you, right? And my hope kind of is that as clinicians are well supported, they might even be able to say, "Oh, I can take on a couple extra clients," right? Like, I can do a little bit more because it feels like I've got a good team around me. I've got people who understand what I wanna do, and so ultimately, kind of not having financial viability and client and therapist well-being be kind of exclusive, but how do we help those 2 things to sit a little closer together so that they feel comfortable for everybody?
Mm-hmm. I like that.
So tell me about Safe Haven. And what is Safe Haven, and what are you doing with it? Or, and where's it at?
Yeah, yeah, good question. So, safe haven is another kind of outcome. So it was started with Alexis and I, who had been, partners in Hope and Healing. And then we had this other therapist who is just amazing, who joined our practice, Mari Appledorn. And she also values a lot of things around play and creating healthy cultures for therapists and doing supervision. So during COVID, we were seeing a lot of therapists who were burnt out, who were struggling, and we were seeing a lot of clients or a lot of therapists and peers in the field who were kind of past the supervision point where they were licensed, but now they were kind of like in this mid career thing where they're like, do I want to go into private practice? I don't really have supervision, but I'm definitely seeing a lot of stuff in my clinical work that would be helpful to talk to somebody else about. So, Safe Haven was started as kind of an effort to support therapists at any point in their journey. And so we've had lots of conversations too about like, what is it that we really want to honor and hone in on with Safe Haven? And one of the things that we're continuing to do more and more is just to support people at all kind of through their career trajectory of this work. But one of the kind of exciting things is we're starting to do an online library of, we've been presenting a lot on supervision. We've been at Mayo, we've worked with different schools, we worked with different places where we've done a lot of training on supervision around imposter syndrome and burnout and just different things. So now we're like, oh, we've got all this great content. So our next venture in that is to think about how do we create kind of an online learning library that may have some kind of community, social media community around it, just to continue to help therapists kind of navigate in this work that we're doing.
Okay. So once you're done being supervised, you don't know everything is what you're saying.
You don't, and in other countries, they don't cut supervision off, right? Like,
Oh, really?
I don't
Okay.
know, yeah, I still love supervision consultation for myself, right? I continue to be like,
Yeah.
"Wow, the
Yeah.
more I know about this field, the more I realize there's a lot that I don't know."
There's
And
uh-huh.
Safe Haven is just picking up the torch at that. Well, and it sounds like before a little bit
That
too, but then also after supervision for just continued learning, continued self improvement, continued understanding.
Yeah, and we really want supervision to be more than just like a box that we have to check as a requirement that we have to do, but
Right.
how can it be a tool to, create health in this field? How can it be a tool to build niches and get the training that people want? How can it be a tool to help people to find the career path that they want? So we really want it to be more than just a box people have to check.
cool. Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Oh,
Mhm,
well, so a broader question, Sarah. When you think about
mhm,
the future of this field, this therapeutic field that we're
Mhm.
in, what is
mhm.
giving you hope right now?
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting, we've been talking about a lot of questions, and this one is one that I've like had the most need to sit with.
Mm,
Um, and I think one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is, I did this presentation recently on like best practices in clinical documentation, and so it led me to explore a lot around AI and things like that. And so I think there's a lot of talk of AI in our field. And I think, sometimes there's this big fear of like, are we as therapists all gonna, lose our job to chatbots and things like that? But I think one of the things as I was thinking about our conversations and kind of growing a niche and things like that is I think this idea that if we can create practices that are healthy for therapists to work at,
Mhm.
that can be healthy then for client care, and therapists can show up regulated and ready to welcome in clients to do the honoring work that they need to do. I think there's no chance that a chatbot's going to take our job. Right. So I think the
okay.
more we can help therapists to be regulated and resourced in this work, I think we're all going to have a lot of longevity in this field.
Oh,
Uh,
that I'm thinking of isomorphism and just that whole yeah, what having a therapist who's happy with where they're at, how that translates to clients, I'm for sure. I'm completely on board with that. And yeah, it's not going to replace, or Chat GPT or whatever isn't going to replace that.
Okay. So
Relationship.
humans modeling human behavior.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
That'd be good, Paul.
Yeah. Right. Well, because especially with AI, and we talk a lot about this with our staff too, with how artificial intelligence is going to change the work that we do. It's going to change the work that everybody does in one way or another, and one of the keys being, to I think it's healthy to be a little afraid of it because it's so new and there seems to be so much potential. But also you got to remember to ask yourself how to make it work for you as an individual to do what you need to get done. And so, yeah, this is a very interesting time, especially in such a relational, human to human based industry or field that we're in, to find these these kind of non-human but sort of wannabe human things, and find ways that they can make us better.
Yeah. Enhance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and support client care, right? Because we're freed up to really devote time to that relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Mhm.
Well, Sarah, thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah.
Sharing your insight on defining, or on how defining a niche can strengthen both the therapists and their clients. Anything else that you want to add to the conversation?
No, it was really fun to be here with you too. I would almost love to interview you back, right? I feel like, talking about AI and other things becomes so interesting, right? And Jim, I know you've had a long career and probably thinking about some of these things, but I just appreciate the opportunity to be here
Long,
with you both.
graying career. Oh, shoot.
What episode was that you were talking about filling out the HICFA?
Oh, the
by
HICFA on the
hand?
weekends. Yeah, the red HICFA. Oh my gosh, since 1981. So it has been a while.
Yes,
So,
yes,
wow.
yes. Very
Yeah.
cool.
Well, if there's ever a Safe Haven podcast, we'd love to get on that and chat with you. You
Awesome.
can ask us anything you want.
Yes.
We'll make it fun,
Yes.
at least.
Oh, you guys have a lot of thoughts about the field we're in and how it's moving, I would imagine, and just kind of being at that high level that you are, you probably see a lot. So, yeah.
And the hard part's going to be doing it right and doing right by providers and clients.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, well, Sarah, yeah, we really appreciate your perspective here and just describing, the meaning of niche for you, and just, how that can be really positive in your life, but also in the lives of the therapists that, are coming to work with you and for you. So this has been really good. It's been a great discussion about niche.
Yeah.
Awesome.
And for everyone listening out there, remember, you don't have to be everything to everyone. If there's anything we learned here today, I think sometimes the best way to grow is to focus in, or as we like to say here, find your true course and stay the tack.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
So So remember, the only thing worse than being off course is trying to sail in every direction at once.
Wow, that's really something. Or
Tying it together with the theme here, aren't we?
you got to be on the right tack.
All right. Well, we do like to end each episode with a question. What's something you've been thinking about lately? Anything you've been thinking about? Is there anything you want to promote or talk about personally or professionally? I don't know, Dad, how about you? We'll start with you, maybe. Switch it up a bit.
I had an answer, but now I forgot.
Just haven't been thinking.
So I haven't been thinking much. No, you know what I've been doing? So my wife got her hip replaced a little over a week ago now, and it's like her progress in that. It's been something to see. She's been doing great. We just got back from the PT, and the guy's going, "Yeah, Lisa, you're doing a great job," everything like that. And so I get back to gratefulness and seeing her progress the way she has. has been good. It's been challenging because she hasn't made me breakfast every morning like she usually does, because she likes to do it. Okay.
Oh.
Yeah. Otherwise I'd be eating Pop-Tarts, but yeah. No, so I'm grateful that that surgery went well. So
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I know when mom leaves to go visit friends or whatever, I know the Pop-Tarts do come out. He'll send a picture to the family like, oh, breakfast
For sure.
without Lisa.
Oh.
Well, I had a really interesting, something I've been thinking about that's kind of stuck with me from this weekend is we had somebody helping us do the Scout fundraising. It's wreath season in Scouts for fundraising. And one of the, somebody I was working with was talking about how he was going through a tough time with his family, like a medical thing. And then somebody, there's people that say, just let me know if I can do anything for you. And then there's people who just do something, and how powerful that was for him. And how I'm going to try to, make that something that I do too when I'm, when people around me are experiencing tough situations like that, is to, instead of just saying, let me know how I can help, because you never know. You just have no idea when you're going through something, but to just do. And that was something that kind of, hit me, in the chest a little bit. That was pretty cool.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Just do.
Just do. How about you, Sarah? You been thinking about anything lately?
Oh gosh. It's interesting, like I said, I do a lot of youth sports. We've got softball and baseball players. And so I think it's just interesting to be like a mental health provider and watch kids navigate the complexities of sports and the pressures they experience. I think it's also interesting to watch parents, right, and parental anxiety that can come up in that process. And so, and my own anxiety too, right? So I've just really enjoyed that. And then, you know, Jim and Paul, when you're asking about play, it's really kind of interesting to see sometimes at these swim meets, they'll play like the Macarena, and the whole pool deck of people from different swim teams will start dancing.
Yeah.
And so, one of my things is just to like notice all this pressure in youth sports, but then to see moments of play and how that releases the tension. So I don't know. I just kind of like to sit back on some of these weekends and just observe a lot of that.
Oh, that's cool. That's really cool.
Yeah. Well,
Spontaneous.
I love spontaneity. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah.
Paul, I think
Jim?
that might be it for the Right Tack.
You're going to call it for this episode?
Should we do that, Sarah?
so.
Should we call it? So,
Do it.
Okay. Make sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts.
And if you like what you're hearing, share it with your friends and colleagues.
And until next time,
Keep your eyes on the horizon.